Thank you, Peter, very much, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Peter Corbishley is quite an operator, I have to say. So I promised my kids at New Year, they said, "Dad, please can you slow down, spend a bit more time with us, stop doing all these public things and all the rest of it." Peter said, "Can we meet for a coffee?" And before my decaf flat white was half empty, I'd agreed to do an article and do a talk. So you're gluttons for punishment. Several of you would have listened to Tony Collier a few months ago. So you've had 2 chartered accountants in about 3 months, so you must be mad. I am not Tony Collier. I think he is the most remarkable man, and I think probably must be the UK's leading patient advocate for people for prostate cancer. He's absolutely tremendous. So this comes with a health warning that I am not him. I'm fairly new at this because, as you'll hear, I've been diagnosed less than 2 years, so there will be people in the audience who've been living with this disease far longer than me. So please don't treat me. I hope nothing comes across as patronising in anything I say. And there are also medically trained people here, so I apologise in advance if my understanding and explanation of things misses the mark. So without further ado, and I can also overshare and talk forever, so I am actually going to try and time myself to stop waffling on for too long. Thank you very much to the guys for getting us a screen. Most of it is pictures, I hasten to add, but if the writing's there and you struggle to see it, I apologise in advance. So why am I talking to you? Well, it sounds a bit like Alcohol Anonymous list, doesn't it? I'm Ian and I've got prostate cancer. And I've got stage 4, so I always like expensive things, so I'm one of the £300,000 people. It's quite difficult to think how to talk to a group of people who've got the same disease, because the message going out raising awareness is quite easy, saying go get tested, but when you're talking to people that have got the disease or their partners, it's a bit difficult. So what I thought is and try and talk about how one bloke is trying to muddle through life with everything that's thrown at me in life, and as you'll hear, it's been quite a challenging long time, but particularly the last 2 or 3 years. I try and do that with a smile on my face. I'm sure lots of you, when you told people that you've got cancer, the classic line people say, "Be positive," and all the rest of it. Really irritating, actually. You can't decide how you feel. But I do think for our health and well-being, it is great if you can do things that are positive and make you feel positive, and that's how I try and live my life. And I get a buzz out of trying to do something to add value and be positive in my community, as you'll see. So getting stage 4 cancer is a right kick in the whatsits, but if I can do something positive out of that, that helps me deal with it. So what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk a little bit about my background. I'm going to talk about a disease that you've probably never heard of, and my late wife, because she has influenced massively my life and how I'm dealing with this. I'm going to talk about my diagnosis and pathway, because I learned a huge amount in a very short period in dealing with different people in that. A bit about my treatment, a bit about living with incurable cancer and treatment side effects, which I think are just massively underplayed at times. I think it really does change your life. A bit about campaigning, learning and education, fundraising and raising awareness. And then some tips that work for me, and I'm sure we're all different, but I'm just going to tell you what works for me, and if anything comes out of that so it's useful for people, I hope it does. A bit about the future, and then I put Q&A preferably over a beer, but I don't think we've got beer on tap. So, but I'm happy to be interrupted, but if you interrupt me, I'm likely to be here till 11 o'clock, so it might be better to do questions at the end. And I've included some quotes. My wife was a great one for little phrases that kept her going through life, and I've adopted some of those because I think some of them are absolutely brilliant, and I hope they're not too cheesy, but they actually mean something. And I'm going to start with one of them, which is one of my favourites, is don't wait for the rain clouds to pass, learn to dance in the rain. So this is a shit thing to happen, and for a lot of us, hopefully, it'll be something that we live with for a long time. So if you just wait for things to get better, you might have a long wait. And I think it's about learning to see what you can do, and if it's pissing down with rain, learn to enjoy dancing in it. And I am actually, I'm not quite dancing in the rain there, but I'm getting very wet, planting a lot of trees last winter, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So a bit about my background. Educationally, I had a very privileged, without VAT, education. I went to Hawford Lodge, just outside Worcester on the Kidderminster bypass. I then went to King's School in Worcester, and then I went to Durham University, where I did a rugby degree with a smattering of geography, and did just enough to get out of it at the end without my dad smacking me round the head. But I was very lucky. I absolutely loved my education, and part of the reason why I was so lucky, I tried to get into King's at 8, and I failed the exam, and that's when my parents borrowed some money and sent me to Hawford, and I found what I was good at, which was sport. And I got into King's at 13 with the best common entrance results, because I just found my confidence, and I'd found my confidence through various sports, but rugby in particular, which despite being built like a weasel, I was quite a quick weasel, so I played quite a lot of rugby. My career, I'm a chartered accountant and a chartered tax advisor. As I've said to my kids, if there's anyone that can plan for inheritance tax on my early demise, I am the man. So I trained at a firm called Deloitte Haskins and Sells in the old days, which is now part of PwC in Birmingham. And then fairly young, when I was 27, I was put on something they call partner track, which meant I could move to London. But I just married a Worcestershire farmer's daughter, so I didn't really fancy the idea of going to London. And I'm a great believer in fate, and there was an advert for a job in Worcester in Taxation magazine that week, and it was to go to a firm called Rabjohns in Worcester, which is College Yard, just by the cathedral. So I went there as a 27-year-old tax partner designate, and I became a partner at 30 and the managing partner at 35. And developed that from a one-office practice into quite a special firm. We joined an international network, and we had a fantastic client base. So I had Morgan Carr's Worcestershire County Cricket Club, acted for Cecil Duckworth. I was his personal accountant for the last 35 years of his life, helped him set up Worcester Warriors and the Community Foundation, Harris Brushes, Eastnor Castle. So I had a fantastic client base, and I was just saying to Peter and Diana earlier, I really enjoyed my work, and one of my daughter's friends once asked, what exactly does your dad's job entail? And she said, it seems to involve coffee, lunch and showing off, which I thought was a little cheeky, but anyway, I did love it. And then when I got to about the age of 50, I needed a bit of change, so I merged my firm with a firm called Bishop Fleming that Peter mentioned. Bishop Fleming have got 8 offices now that go down the southwest, and Worcester was the northern outpost, and turns over about £40 million and has got 500 people. So I merged the Worcester office into that, and they made me the chair of that, which suited me very nicely because I got to visit all the offices and have coffee and lunch and show off, basically. But I also had the most profitable client base out of all of my partners, so that was quite good fun. And I had the great privilege of having 35 years of College Yard being my base office, which is just a stunning place to work, right next to the cathedral and a stone's throw from school. And although I've travelled a lot, I love the fact that I worked in a city where I grew up, and you bump into clients and former rugby friends and school friends in the high street. I loved that. That will probably be too small to read, but whilst I was at work, I had a number of outside roles, and I've continued all of those into, I don't call it my retirement, I call it my third phase. And I do seem to be busier now than I was when I was working. So I'm the chair of trustees of two quite sizable trusts, so the Kildare Trust and the Rowlands Trust. Kildare Trust, we are winding up next year, but we'll have made grants of about £14 million in the last few years. So some significant ones recently. We gave £1.5 million as bursary funding for the first UK students at the Three Counties Medical School in Worcester, which was the catalyst for a series of things that's eventually led to there being 50 funded places from the government. And we've just built a new hall at the Three Counties Showground for £1.5 million, and we've, don't know if you're familiar with the Myriad Centre, which does wonderful work in Worcester for young adults with severe learning and physical difficulties, but we've given them £1 million towards a new building. So some really big projects, but very ones that leverage more money generally, so that's been very satisfying. I'm the founder and chair of the Clothiers Company of Worcester Charitable Foundation. So the Clothiers Company is Worcester's ancient trade guild that goes back to 1511 and has only ever had 35 members at any one time. So I am one of them, which is the red waistcoat and me boring the pants off the Princess Royal there in one of the photos you probably can't see. I'm then a trustee of the Lowsley Charities, which is some small charities near where I live, and the Six Masters, which have two almshouses in Worcester, one by the grammar school, which will amuse Paul, because I think I'm the first Six Master since it was set up in Queen Elizabeth I's reign, who hasn't been an old Elizabethan. Terrible. And then I'm a governor of the University of Worcester as well. So I've got a bit going on in my life, which is great. So I'm going to tell you a bit about my wife, and the reason why I'm telling you that is because her influence has been massive in how I've dealt with having a life-limiting disease. And what I learnt from her was all about resilience and determination, and from a disease that you've probably never heard of, but also for the women in the room, I learnt a lot about being a carer, because I was Lit's main carer for 15 years, including through COVID, which was pretty desperately difficult. So I met Lit when I was 21 and she was 19 in the Farriers, which is where all King's boys meet people, because we're a bit shy and we don't go very far. And on New Year's Eve 1981, on the Cathedral roundabout, I asked her out and she said no. So I was a bit persistent. Anyway, very beautiful girl, and you probably can't see very well, but the picture on the right at the top is Lit with a tractor. And all she wanted to do when she was at school was work at home on the farm. So she's a farmer's daughter and brilliantly practical, and I'm brilliantly impractical. As I learnt on my first proper date with her, when I borrowed my dad's car to try and impress her, little did I know then she'd no more be impressed by a car than fly to the moon. And we went to the Odeon to see a film, and I swung into a car park at the back of it in my dad's car, which had like a metal air dam at the front, and I drove over a metal spike. And excuse my language, but there is some coming up in this. I went, oh fuck, he'll kill me. And Lit, just quick as a flash, slid underneath the car, straightened this air dam, came back out, dusted herself down. Come on, we'll be late for the film. So I thought, I'm going to marry this girl. And I did marry her, and we were quite young compared with now, but quite normal back then. I was 26 and she was 24, and within a few years we'd had two kids, Kate and Harvey, and all was wonderful until a chain of events happened. Lit's dad, who's a farmer, everyone thought he'd been kicked on the head by a cow, and everyone thought he'd had a stroke, and everyone thought that his mother was a drunk. And what we found out was that none of those were true, but actually Harry had a disease which was very new then, called spinocerebellar ataxia, and their family variation of that is SCA1, type 1. So it was the first one that was identified. That's how new it was. And this used to be misdiagnosed as Huntington's or MS or MND. And what we discovered was that this was a genetically inherited disease. And it's a disease where the cerebellum destroys itself, so messages don't get through. So if someone's got it, when we walk, we send a message to our foot to go there. When someone's got ataxia, they send the message, but they don't know where their foot's going. So it could go there, it could go there, or it could go there. So they wobble around looking drunk. And what happens is they gradually slur their speech more and more, so till they get to the point that people can't understand them. They lose fine motor control, so they can't do buttons up and things like that. They have difficulty walking, eventually ending up in a wheelchair. And the real bugger, if those aren't bad enough, is they have difficulty swallowing and eating. So eventually people aspirate, and that's what kills them. So it's a dreadful, horrible disease. And we went through a difficult, so we'd had our kids by this stage. We went through some counselling. Lit was tested, and we found that she'd got this disease. And the prediction was that it would start to onset by the time she was 40, and she was about early 30s at that point. So that was pretty devastating. My wife was nothing if someone that didn't like spending money. So we walked out of Worcester General Hospital and she said, "Oh, bollocks, let's go and buy a new car." So the red Subaru in that picture, we actually walked straight out of the hospital and walked into the garage that used to be in Pierpoint Street and bought a car. A term that I really like and sort of summed up the way Lit approached life was, I don't know if you've ever listened to or read anything from Frank Dick, who's the ex-British athletics coach. And he wrote a fantastic book called Winning. And in amongst that, he said he classifies people as either valley people or mountain people. And valley people are people who stay in their valley, stick with the status quo. If rain comes over, it just rains on them, they get wet, and they don't see very much of the world, and they use phrases like could have, should have, would have, and just let things go by. Mountain people are people that are up for a bit more of a challenge, and they push boundaries a bit. They see how far they can go. They know if you climb up the hill, you're going to get a better view, but actually if you get so far, there's a bit more to climb. You might slide down a bit, you might hurt yourself, but you push yourself. And Lit was one of those people that pushed herself a bit. And we had a big decision to make because we were living in a house that was completely inappropriate for someone with this disability coming along, but on the family farm that we absolutely loved. And right in the middle of this family farm was an acre plot with an amazing tumble-down cottage that the guy still lived in, that wasn't owned as part of the farm. And this guy had always said he'd only ever sell to us, and we'd always said if we could ever buy old Joe's place, that's where we'd build our dream house. So what we did was with kids that were then 9 and 7, and as the senior partner of a firm of accountants, we lived in a caravan for 18 months while we built a house. If you can see the state of what was there before, this guy, Joe, was born in this house. It had no running water. It had no sanitation of any kind. His pigs lived in the house with him. The one picture up there shows some metal. He worked on 5 farms, and every time he came back, he'd bring something that he thought might be useful. And when he left, he took 6 articulated trailer loads of metal that he thought would be useful, and we filled 27 skips by hand of all the rest. And that was just in the garden. So that was quite something. And and part of it was idyllic. So we started off on a summer, and all of our friends wondered about what we'd done selling this big house and moving into a caravan. So we had barbecues every night, and I think I went to bed pissed every night, and I didn't realise quite how uncomfortable the bed was until the winter. The kids are there playing bows and arrows and all the rest of it. We didn't have a drive at that point, and it's 250 yards off our lane. So we had a Land Rover and a Subaru, and I used to have to go to work in a pair of overalls and wellies, and I had to carry the kids to the car so they didn't get muddy, and then have a shower at work. But one of Lit's phrases, which I absolutely loved, we're only going to do this once, so let's not cut corners. So my wife did know how to spend, and everything we did on the house was, let's just go one notch higher. So what we built was the house that I live in now, Goose Farm, and you can't tell to look at it, but that's a house built for a disabled person. So it's very open plan, wheelchair width, doorways, and all the rest of it. We had a massive battle with Malvern Hills District Council getting it, but we had fantastic support from our neighbours, one of whom was the chairman of the Council for Protection of Rural England at the time, so that helped. And Lit was a landscape architect first time round, so she designed all of the garden, but designed quite a lot of the house as well. Part of that was a fully accessible wet room, which was absolutely brilliant, with the world's most expensive toilet. So that is a wash-dry toilet. If you've never used one, they're the best things in the world. And perhaps Dan will be able to blank out my beeps. But one of Lit's great phrases, that was bloody expensive, that bathroom. And she said, "You've spent so much fucking money on this bathroom, I better live long enough to make use of it." Coming back to Lit's sort of fighting spirit, when the kids left school, she was on sticks by then, but she said, "I've still got something left in me, so I'd like to go back to university and do a second degree." So she did a fine art degree, became a ceramicist, and that's one of her torsos on the photo there. She had her work in galleries in London, around the country, had an exhibition at Hidcote Manor Garden, and whatever. The letter on the right is a letter from then Prince Charles, and topped and tailed and underlined by him when we'd been to visit Highgrove, and Lit wrote him a letter and sent him one of her torsos and said, "I'm so inspired by your garden, I'd like to give you a gift. My work's rubbish, I'm sure you'll just throw it away and loads of people send you things, so don't worry." And he wrote a letter back saying, "Thank you so much, far from throwing it away." Just lovely, and that was one of her prized possessions, but classic farmer and artist. Didn't think she was any good. The other thing she did was, when you have ataxia, one of the things you can't do, by this stage she couldn't walk unaided, but she couldn't walk backwards and she couldn't walk on tiptoe. So what we did every Saturday morning was we went to the Methodist Hall at Ombersley Road, so not very far from you, and we had a ballroom dancing lesson with a coach and us two. And Lit said it was the equivalent of flying, because with me holding her, she could actually move. Bloody hard to lead, I can tell you, when someone doesn't know where their feet are going. And her consultant in London didn't believe that someone with her condition could do that. So she actually has a video now of Lit that she shows patients what they can do. And that's the bit that really resonates with me now, is she always used to say, "See what you can do, not what you can't." And things don't have to limit you. She worked massively on her fitness. She was very determined to die at home. She didn't want to be in a home. Her elder sister, so she's one of 3. Her elder sister had the same disease and died in a home in Australia. Middle one hasn't got it. Lit had it obviously, and she said, I want to be fit enough that you can look after me at home with help so I never have to move out. And one of our best friends is the head of strength and conditioning at Worcester University. He came out 3 times a week and worked incredibly hard to keep her core strong so that she could still move with help. So that's her in the middle doing some of her work. We built a swimming pool when we built the house with some wide steps so she could go down on her bum. And that's too small for you to see probably, but she's got a load of flotation aids and is floating on her back. And one day she said, I'd forgotten how much I love clouds, because if you've got no balance, you can't look up like that because it just throws you completely. And they're just things that you don't think about. We loved going to music, and this is us going to see Texas at Symphony Hall in Birmingham. This was the last outing that we ever went on, and Lit's favourite phrase was, this disease is fucking crap, but you get really good parking and seats, which was great. By this stage, sadly, she was nil by mouth, so she was being fed and watered and taking all her drugs by a peg tube, and we'd gone through COVID, and we had to cut out any external care because she was so vulnerable. I was still on the day job full time. While we were doing that, she'd lost the ability to go to the loo on her own, so I was listening for the pinger to go, and part of my job was sort of head of pastoral care for my 46 partners, and I get phone calls every so often and saying, I'm really struggling with my mental health, having to work from home. So, tell me all about it. By this stage, thanks to the wonders of some IVF treatment at Guy's in London and a 3-year very difficult time because of COVID, my daughter and son-in-law were pregnant, and they live in a house in the garden next door to us, and Lit was determined to see the baby arrive, and she did do that. So Milo, our first grandchild, arrived 13 days before Lit died and came home 6 days before she died, but she got to meet him and hold him, so that was lovely. She designed her own funeral and had several messages for people in it, which were quite amusing. And she wanted that. When we built the house, I planted a wood, 4,500 trees, and that's got a clearing in the middle of that. And we had her funeral in the wood and in the clearing. And she said, just a small tent would be fine, because I don't think very many people would come. Do you know the price of marquees? Jeez. Anyway, so you might think, why the bloody hell is he talking about his wife? That's been a huge change to my life in seeing someone dealing with that, but also being a carer as well. And I found that incredibly difficult. And as you'll see, I got some help to deal with that, because that's very difficult to talk to your kids about when they're seeing their mother going through that. So onto my diagnosis and pathway, and I was really interested in some of the discussion about PSA earlier on, because I am thankfully a living, walking model on why we should do PSA tests. So you won't be able to read that, I expect. But previously, from 2010 to 2019, I'd had a PSA test more or less every year at the scheme that Worcestershire Ambassadors used to do up at Six Ways. And my PSA was always really low. It was about 0.7 or whatever. Then COVID came and Caring for Lit came, and I have no PSA test for a while. And I was due to retire on the 31st of May 2022, and the firm got in touch and said, would you like to have a private medical on the firm's policy before you retire? Yeah, I'm Peter Pan. They can tell me how fantastically fit I am. I'll do that. So I went to that on the 3rd of May 2022, and on the 9th of May, they rang me to say my PSA was raised. And in the greater scheme of things, when you hear of people who've got a PSA of 1200 or 399 or whatever. Mine wasn't that high, it was 6.24, but obviously outside the range that it should have been. But more importantly, 0.7 to 6.24 is a hell of a jump in the sort of 3 years during which I hadn't had one. So that was the 9th of May. The 10th of May, Lit died. Those are 2 special days in my life. The 31st of May, I retired, and that would have been our 36th wedding anniversary. The 1st of June was when we had Lit's celebration of life on the farm. And then the 8th of June, I had my first meeting with the urologist. And one of the lessons I learned is how desperately important it is, if at all possible, to get to see people that you like and trust and treat you as a human being. Because I had the most massive contrast. I had a urologist who seemed to be irritated when I was asking questions, and one of the letters to my GP actually said, I have to say, Ian asks a lot of questions. Well, how dare I? And on the 17th of June, I had an MRI scan. 29th of June, I had a transperineal biopsy, the outcome of which was that I'd got serious prostate cancer. So they started straight away on hormone treatment. So that was the 21st of July. And 29th of July, I had a PSMA PET scan. And 10th of August, I had the results from that, and I'd actually gone to Scotland, and in amongst everything else, my son's wife had decided to leave him just before Lit died, so my son was having a hard time, and I got a cottage booked in Scotland. So I said to Harv, let's go to Scotland, this guy can ring us, and I'll put you on speakerphone so you can hear what he says as well. And he said, there's bad news. He said, the bad news is that it's spread, and it's spread to your rectum, which is unusual and quite rare. The good news is it's not in your skeleton. So I said, well, what's that mean for my prognosis? And he said, we aim to cure you of this. So I said, really? Okay, that's good. And I said to Harv, what did you hear? And he recounted exactly that. And he said, I need to refer you to an oncologist now. So on the 28th of August, I met my oncologist, who is still my oncologist, who I think is brilliant. And he opened with one of the best opening lines I know for a medic, but for many other things as well. He said, why don't you tell me exactly what you've understood from what you've been told so far? So I recounted what I've been told. And he said, I'm really sorry, but that's got lost in the telling. He said, this is incurable, and we're aiming to just control it. And we went on to have a discussion about prognosis, which wasn't very good. So that was quite a mind-blowing moment for me. But I instantly got the impression from this guy, he was dealing with a person who'd got prostate cancer. The urologist was a person who I thought was dealing with the cancer-ridden prostate gland, not a person. And my oncologist, I thought was fantastic, because I'm a bit of a planner, and you can't really live my style of life without being a planner. So I'd read up that I'd got 3 months of hormone treatment, then I went on to my radiotherapy. So I said, right, well, that's the 28th of November, so I'm guessing we're starting the Monday following that, so I can clear my diary. And he said, just calm down. He said, you've had the year from hell. He said, I suggest you take Christmas off, let your hair down, have a few beers with the kids, and we'll do this in January, which I thought was great. And he's been like that throughout. I'm totally ignoring time, by the way, at the moment. So if it gets too dark, just shout. So my diagnosis, which I'm sure you can't read from there, was I got Gleason 9, so 5 plus 4. My biopsy, I got 27 out of 37 cause positive at all 7 sites. The cancer had spread to my mesorectal lymph nodes, which was not a phrase I was familiar with before I'd got cancer. So it was in my rectum, and I was stage 4 advanced and incurable grade 5. And they said pretty quickly that, because when I first went to see them before the PET scan, they were talking about options including surgery. When they realised it had spread, said surgery's out, because even if we did want to take out your prostate, we'd have to remove some of your rectum and your bowel and whatever, and we don't want to do that. So it's radiotherapy and hormone treatment. Add into this mix for 2022, the year of all years, my dog then died. I thought, so this picture is taken on New Year's Eve 2022, 2 days after my dog had died as well. So I've been widowed and I've got incurable and cancer in the same sentence. So the kids and I just had a massive bonfire and said, right, 2022, piss off. And at that point, and I'd talked quite a bit about my prognosis, and I'd read quite a lot about people in my condition, and I'd done the stupid thing of Googling things, and you go down a rabbit hole, as I'm sure plenty of people in the room have. And I've got a little grandson living 30 yards away from me. And statistically, this was a nonsense, but I thought I'd give myself a stretch target. So from that point on, my mantra has been Project Milo 21, in that I'm aiming to see my grandson at his 21st birthday party, which statistically is a very long shot, but if you don't aim big, what the hell? So and that I got a puppy as well in January that year as well. So that's Dixon, me and Milo going for a walk around the garden, and that's him trying to change gear in my Morgan. So my treatment, this really is small. So I can't even read that. So androgen deprivation therapy, and that's first generation. So Prostate, 3 monthly at the GP, as a lot of people will have, but then second generation as well, so abiraterone, which is what Tony's on as well. So those are daily horse tablets. I'm then on steroids because abiraterone buggers up quite a bit of your body, so you have to have some steroids to counteract some of what it does. So I'm on prednisolone, which I can never pronounce. I had 37 fractions of radiotherapy at the Worcestershire Oncology Centre, which just what a great facility that is. We're really lucky to have that here, and the staff are fantastic. They've got a great sense of humour as well. There's a really nice guy called Richard, and they played really crap music all the time I was there. And then one day he had a Pink Floyd playlist going, and when he came in to get me out, I said, "That's much better, Pink Floyd." I said, the irony of playing Comfortably Numb while I was lying there wasn't lost to me. He said, "We do have to be careful with you pelvic boys, because we were playing Ring of Fire the other day." But I thought they were great. And then the abiraterone and prednisolone and all the rest of it can give you osteoporosis. So I have a 6 monthly infusion of zoldronic acid to try and strengthen my bones. And then I have a thing called AdCal every day, which is to help my bones as well. A bit about abiraterone. Abiraterone is highly effective at extending the life as a first-line treatment for people with advanced prostate cancer where it hasn't got very far. So in the main, abiraterone is used for people where it's spread everywhere or have gone through a whole series of treatments. But what the Stampede trial found was that people in my position who've been early diagnosed, but it's metastasized but hasn't gone all over the place, it's a really effective treatment. So that's the good bit. The bad bit is not available on the NHS in England and Wales for people in my condition. it is available in Scotland. And my dad, albeit being a miserable old bugger when he was alive, but he was a Scot, so I did wonder about trying to resurrect a passport. Luckily for me, I've got some private medical cover, and my private medical cover covers my abiraterone, but that is eye-wateringly expensive, my cover, because abiraterone, even though it's now come off licence, still costs £2,700 a month, and my premiums are going through the roof. So I dread to think what happens in September when I get the next lot. I'm not sure how much of that you can see, and those medically trained people in the room, just close your ears for 5 minutes while I try to pretend I know what I'm talking about. But I thought it would be interesting, if you don't know the difference between the first generation and second generation androgen deprivation therapy. So first generation, like Prostate or Zoladex, what that does is it stops some of the hormones in the brain that send the messages to the testicles to produce testosterone. So that's what that does. But that only accounts for about 80 or 90% of the testosterone that our bodies produce, because our adrenal glands also produce testosterone, about 10 or 20% of it. And some of the second generation therapies, such as enzalutamide, what they do is that, and these are called androgen receptor suppressors. What they do is they block the messages from the adrenal glands to cut out that extra bit of testosterone. What abiraterone does is actually turns off a load of the processes that go on in the adrenal glands, and so there's no testosterone produced by the adrenal glands. But that's why you have to have the steroids, because one of the things the adrenal glands do is manage and monitor your blood pressure. So if you're on abiraterone, you are properly chemically castrated because you've just got nothing. But also they have to monitor you quite carefully, because it can bugger up your liver and your kidneys and your blood pressure. And there comes a point for most men when they can't tolerate abiraterone anymore. And that's where, quite apart from being my hero on his patient advocacy, Tony Collier is just a great bloke to follow, because he's been on this for 7 years now, and is amazingly active. So that, seeing people like him really gives me hope. And what my oncologist has said to me, he started off initially with the immortal line, "I'll be surprised if you die within 2 years." Wasn't so optimistic about 5 years. More recently, I had a really good follow-up scan about 12 months into my treatment, and he said, "Your body is reacting incredibly well to this." So he said, "I'm putting money on the 5 years now. I won't put money on 10 years, but what I will put money on is us having a lot more treatments by the time this isn't working for you." Because as you probably know, there's two things that will happen. One is your body no longer tolerates abiraterone, but the other is when the metastases don't need testosterone anymore. So when you're castration resistant, and the metastases start spreading anyway. And as it's been explained to me, they've dealt with what they've seen. What they haven't dealt with is what they haven't found yet. And that's a pretty damn scary thing, I think, to get your head around when you've got this stuff inside you. So a bit about living with incurable cancer and the side effects. And I've put living alone because it's bloody hard on your own. I talk to my dog, but he doesn't talk back to me. And when you start getting in a cycle going the wrong way, you've got to find a way of getting back out of that. Those are coming up as completely blank, aren't they? You're going to get a series of blank boxes there, which have actually got words on and here. So what they should say is fatigue, So I'm sure, like a lot of you, I do suffer from fatigue, and I'm not quite sure when it's going to happen or not. The yellow one is insomnia. I suffer from insomnia in that I will wake up at night quite often because of the third box, which is hot flushes, and I just can't get back to sleep because I don't feel tired at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I do feel really tired at 6:30 in the morning when I've got to get up. On the next line is loss of sexual function. When abiraterone has done its job, you've got nothing, including no libido. And when I was first diagnosed and didn't realise how serious it was, I was a bit, bloody hell, no sexual function, that's pretty bad. By the time I knew how ill I was thinking, bloody hell, I'd rather be alive, to be quite frank. And when you don't have any libido, you don't care, to be quite frank. So, and then the purple one is muscle wastage. And I'm a pretty fit bloke. I do a lot. And if I told you that last year I averaged 17,500 steps a day last year, and as you'll see in a minute, I do lots of stuff. But I thought that would deal with the muscle wastage, and it didn't. So I've suffered from quite severe muscle wastage in my legs. I've always been a scrawny bugger, but I was a sprinter, and I've always had a strong bum and strong legs. And it turned, and my legs have just wasted. And it turns out I've got severe hip arthritis in both my hips. And the hip man thinks I was masking it before because I was so fit. So I'm actually in quite a lot of pain at the moment because my legs have withered. And then the last one is depression. And I don't know how other people have been, but on this treatment, my emotions can be all over the place. I mean, it's a pretty toxic mix of things to have to start with, but you add in your moods going up and down, and I found that really difficult at times, and it's not really surprising, given what's going on. So,
ask you a question?
Yeah, of course you can.
So symptoms, is that as a result of the disease or the drugs?
I think it's a combination. So I think emotionally, I think your emotions are part of the treatment because having no testosterone makes you a bit more emotional and up and down. And then situationally, bloody hell, you're down here and my wife's died and I've got cancer. So I think it's a bit of both. One of the challenges, and I'm sure other people find the same, is knowing what is the cancer and what's something else. Because at the end of the day, we're all getting older. As my wife used to say, if I moan about a joint, it's usually because of a rugby injury rather than anything else. And I think there is a challenge sometimes knowing what's what. Because I said to the oncologist, how do we know if things are going wrong further down the line? And he said, well, we'll be checking your PSA all the time, and you might start getting bone pain. I said, bloody hell, have you seen my skeleton? I really won't be able to tell if I've got bone metastases from that, because I've got too many broken bones anyway. So a bit about what I'm doing about it. I go to the gym. So my friend Scriv, I go to the Worcester University gym, and he puts me through my paces. I play walking rugby up at the amateur club at Six Ways, which is great fun. I've mastered the art of the hobbling sidestep, which I'm really quite good at. I utilise some of Lit's kit at home, so I've got some straps on a beam, I've got a recumbent cross trainer, and I've got a little gym in my barn, and that's Dixon when he was a little puppy, just checking up on me. I go on a long range walk every year. I've got 3 mates, and we're 3 weeks into doing the Southwest Coastal Path. So last year we did 110 miles in 6 days, which when you've got bowel incontinence can be quite challenging. Most long-range walks, there's a wood or something. For a large part of the Southwest Coastal Path, there's a cliff and a wall. So that was quite interesting. I've got an e-bike. I go cycling. This e-bike doesn't have a crossbar, I had a previous e-bike which did have a crossbar, and because of my wonky hips, I can't actually get on it anymore. So I part-exed it, and as my dear friends have told me, you can't get your leg over in any sense, can you? Which I thought was very kind of them. I've got a 40-acre farm and do quite a bit on it, and part of that I'm doing some work with Malvern Hills Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty at the moment, and I planted 600 trees over the winter, which was quite challenging when your bits don't work very well, and that's called Litty's Copse, so that will ultimately be on the OS map, which would be lovely. And I play golf at Malvern, which I try and do once a week, including in the winter. I've managed to do all that in the main because of my amazing family. So you're on the top right. So Kate and Harvey, Sam, my son-in-law, Milo, who's got a funny thing on because they don't want his picture on social media. And then I've got some amazing friends, most of whom I played rugby with and are just absolute rocks. The guy on the left there used to be the chair of the Local Enterprise Partnership and was the commercial director of O2. So he's the guy that negotiated one-on-one with Steve Jobs to bring the iPhone to Britain. And one of my oldest friends, and I had a very dark moment about 6 months ago, and I was awake at 4:30 in the morning, and I pinged him a WhatsApp, and I said, if you're free this evening just for a chat, could you give me a ring? And the phone went 20 minutes later, and he said, I'm on the way to a board meeting in Hull. I've just pulled in to a service station. I've got a coffee. Talk at me, which is just what you need. I've got two special cars. I've got a unique Morgan with a Cosworth engine in it. And the car on the right you might not recognise, but that's a Bristol, which I've wanted for 35 years. And I had one critical illness policy left. So after my wife had died and I'd got cancer, what does a chartered accountant do in a fuel crisis? I bought a 5.9 litre V8 car. And then walking. I find walking incredibly therapeutic. And I've also got an amazing farm. Our place is just beautiful. That we've got a thing called Broad Dingle, which is a 75-foot deep valley, ancient semi-natural woodland with a stream in the bottom. And I've got an A-frame in my wood, which was meant to be for my 60th birthday party, which got canned because of COVID. But I used it as my socially distanced place. I actually interviewed 5 new partners out there. I put them to challenge to come for a walk around the farm and then come there. But if need be, get professional help. That isn't an axe murderer. It's actually a psychiatrist. And I've been going to see Dr. Dave for the last 17 years whilst I was caring for Lit, and I've carried on seeing him. And in fact, I'm going to see him tomorrow. And one of the best bits of advice he ever gave me was fairly early doors when I was going to see him and Lit was deteriorating. I said, I'm a bit pissed off with my friends, actually. None of them ring me up and say, would you like to go out for a beer tonight? And he said, have you ever asked them? I said, well, no. He said, they're probably walking on eggshells. Just ring them up and tell them you need some help. So I did, and to a bloke, they said, thank Christ for that. And that's the group of people that you saw just then. So, and I made quite a play on that when I was working, because I think particularly, and I'm talking to the partners in the room now, the stresses of being a carer can be quite overwhelming, and we had 500 people, a lot of people who were carers. And if it's okay if you're the chair and you're 50 and you need to take some time off, but if you're 23 and you're looking after your mum, it's pretty scary to ask your boss if you can have some time off. So I tried to make that a real issue for our firm to support carers throughout the organisation. On to campaigning. So I'm now, as my kids have said, I'm now famous for pooing my pants. I picked up on Prostate Cancer UK and Tackle and Sarah Gray's campaign for Boys Need Bins, and thought campaigns are all very well and good, but we need people to actually do something. So I wrote to the chief executives and managing directors of a whole series of venues and organisations in Worcester, and thought I won't do an email because that will get lost. So I did a physical letter. I handwrote the envelope, personal, and I personally topped and tailed the letters, gave them some facts about incontinence, and particularly for prostate cancer, said how it was affecting me, and then asked them to do something about it. I then subtly blackmailed them by saying I was going to be interviewed by the BBC in a few weeks and would like to do something about that. And fantastically, Wychavon District Council, Malvern Hills, Worcestershire County Council, Worcester City Council, Royal Worcester Porcelain Works, several Morgan Cars, several golf clubs, the rugby club, all agreed to do it straight away. So the BBC did do an interview about 3 or 4 weeks ago, which was on radio in Hereford and Worcester quite a lot, but was on Midlands Today and playing throughout the Midlands. They actually then rang me yesterday about this new dye that, I don't know if you saw the announcement on that, and would I like to give a comment on that. So they interviewed me about that yesterday on the radio, and that's when I gave the plug for the PSA test. So and I put that on Twitter as well. So I'm hoping that might have helped the numbers. I think it's really important, and this won't be for everyone, but I like to understand as much as I can about this disease, because I think then you can ask the right questions about it. I read quite a lot. I've got some books that, if I've got time at the end, I'll just show those. There's some great stuff on YouTube. This one in the middle, which is Prostate Cancer Research Institute, is American, and it is very American, but I find those absolutely fascinating. Dr. Mark Schultz, I had the enormous pleasure, the irony in that, this morning while I was having my bath of watching the episode on penile atrophy. There's a way to get you perked up in the morning. But actually, really interesting, and seeing the difference actually here in the States. And then the one on the top left is quite a lot going on in Australia, I found, and this was a really interesting video of a medic there explaining the biology on how prostate cancer gets out of the prostate, which actually helped me understand why it is difficult to get into the rectum. So without obsessing about it, I think it's quite useful to learn as much as possible. I've done some fundraising. January 23, whilst I was having my radiotherapy, Prostate Cancer were doing their Run the Month marathon edition. I don't run anymore, but I do walk, so I walked it, and I walked the equivalent of 8 marathons and tried to tap up everyone I knew, and I tried to stay dry for the whole of my radiotherapy, which I did 64 days, which is a world record for me, and raised £8,500 doing that and topped the leaderboard. Not that I'm competitive, but I thought I recognised the name of the guy who was in second place, and he's called Ashley Jones, and we sort of crossed over at the rugby club and we started vying with each other, and we've ended up, this is us meeting for lunch, and we give a call to each other, and he's done a talk at the rugby club and is doing a big cycle ride in September raising money for prostate cancer. And then one of the trusts I chair is the Kildare Trust, and the trustees there were wonderful, because we just had a mail shot from Prostate Cancer UK saying would they be able to support some of these research projects. They were very good. They excluded me because I'd been conflicted, had a chat without me, decided that Phyllis, the benefactor who I acted for 40 years, would have wanted them to support it. So came to me, said, we'd like to support this. Here are the 6 projects. Would you like to go and ask your new virtual friends which ones they recommend? So I had a chat with Tony, and Tony said, very excited about the project at Newcastle University. I went back to the trustees, who then had another meeting without me and decided to give them £100,000. So I thought I'd go and visit the people in Newcastle, and Ellie Starbuck, who ironically I met in Cafe Nero on Newcastle, station, who's the fundraiser from prostate cancer, said she'd never met them either. So we went on the same day. And so this is a lady called Jennifer Monkley, and their research has found that there are some, I think they're enzymes or proteins that coat prostate cancer cells called glycans, and glycans also show up on other cancer cells, and some other cancers have found ways of turning off glycans. And what her theory is that glycans are part of the process of when prostate cancer cells move into the skeleton. So if they can turn them off, they can turn off that spread. And I saw two amazing photographs of each of 6 mice. The one lot had been injected with prostate cancer and 6 weeks later were riddled with tumours. The others had been injected with prostate cancer. Their glycans had been turned off and they had no tumours. And what really excited me was I always had this vision of scientists working in silos. When we arrived there, she said, we'll give you a 20-minute quick warm-up, but then we're having a Zoom call with Professor so-and-so at Imperial College London, who's dealing with the drug side of it. Then we're going to talk to Professor so-and-so at Sheffield University, who's dealing with the mice side of it. And these were all really joined up. So it was absolutely fantastic. They say there's no such thing as a free lunch, but I got a free dinner at the Savoy, and all it cost the trust was £100,000, I suppose. So after that visit, I got an invitation to go to a private dinner about the Transform project at the Savoy. And I didn't know whether that was going to be 30 people or 300 people. Well, it was 20 people. And I was lucky enough to sit next to Professor Caroline Moore, who's one of the designers of the Transform project. And this was their first sort of public discussion with a select group of funders about it. And it was really interesting. It was a really good two-way conversation because she was quizzing me hard about my pathway and whatever, but that was absolutely fascinating. And then raising awareness. I've been writing a blog on LinkedIn, which I thought was the platform that I got most coverage on from my previous life in the professional world. And I've written 6 blogs so far, and they've had 120,000 views cumulatively. And I've had contact from blokes all over the place, some of whom I know, some of whom I don't know, who've been tested on the back of that. Some of them don't have a problem, some of them have got a problem, but they're dealing with it. So that I found that quite therapeutic for me. I know Paul's a blogger as well, and you get a feeling of helping other people, but actually primarily it helps me, and I'm the most important person in this. Right, some things that work for me. You won't be able to read these because I can't. So as you might tell, I like to keep busy mentally and physically, but and I'm not very good at this. So do as I say, not do as I do. You've got to recognise when it's too much and you need a rest, because I have got to the point where I need a rest every so often. Plan for the worst, live for the best. I spent 40 years trying to get clients to actually die tidily, which sounds miserable, but I've seen too many families where someone's died where the rest of the family don't know where the hell anything is and whatever. So I am the most meticulously organised person in leaving things in good shape for my family. Exercise, whether it's walking, cycling, golfing, the gym, whatever, incredibly important for your body, but I think it's incredibly important for your mind as well. It releases endorphins that help. And I think I'd really stress the gym. What I didn't do enough of was going to the gym and doing resistance work. I was
awful at training when I played. I played some quite serious rugby. I played against Australia as a schoolboy when they had all the Ella brothers, but I hated training, and I really don't like going to the gym, so I have to be forced into it, but I would encourage anyone to do that. Take someone with you when you have important meetings. I went to the first meeting on my own, and I didn't hear anything after Gleason 9, so I always take someone with me. I've got Lit's remaining sister is a retired GP, so she's a really useful person who actually understands medical talk. Diet and limiting alcohol. I'm not a big boozer, but I got to the stage where I'd have a glass of wine every night when I was looking after Lit, and I tried to cut out drinking at home and only drink when I go to a function. And I always had a good diet, but I've concentrated on just having a really good, healthy, balanced diet. Learning about this disease. I've got friends who are being treated. Someone who's having abiraterone who thinks it's chemotherapy. I've got friends that still call it prostate cancer. So I think it's really important to understand what it is so you can have sensible discussions with your physicians. Find medics you like and you trust. That's not always easy, but I think it's really important that you get on with the people who are doing such an important job for your life. It helps me setting some goals and targets, and because I'm an oversharer, I like to tell other people, and I can't get out of it. There were days where I really didn't want to plant 600 trees in the peeing down rain when my bones ached, but I told everyone I was going to do it, so I had to. Tell your mates when you need some help, really important. And partners, you need your own respite. Brilliant, the work Alison's doing with the partner group. But I think that's vitally important. Because to me, incurable is incurable at the moment. I think there is so much going on in this world. I'm nearly at the end, you'll be pleased to know. So the future, in the short term, I'm going on a rail trip. I'm going to Berlin, Dresden, Prague, Krakow, Warsaw in about 3 weeks, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm walking the next bit of the Southwest Coastal Path in September. I'm slightly concerned that when I get to a stile, it might be like the Daleks meet the steps. But our guide has had 2 knees replaced, so we've decided we'll pull each other over. And then next year I'm going to be quite busy because I'm going to be the High Sheriff of Worcestershire. So if you've got bowel incontinence and you're wrapped up in that, God help us. In the long term, whatever that might be, the last words Lit said to me was that she wanted the family to be able to keep Goose Farm and carry on living there. So my objective in life is to try and make sure I've got things organised so they can. And I love this phrase. The true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. So I planted 4,500 trees that have seen 2 weddings and a funeral, but this last 600, I don't think they'll give me much shade. And I want to defy the odds and speak embarrassingly badly at my grandson's 21st birthday party. So, thank you for listening. I have no idea what time it is. It's probably about 10 o'clock.
Sorry. Wow, follow that. I'm going to say a few words about Ian and about this evening shortly. But first of all, what I'd like to do is open up, the chance for other people to make comments or ask Ian any questions that they have while it's all very fresh in our minds. So I'll come round with the microphone. Is there anybody who would like to start the ball rolling? Anybody over here? Okay. David.
Yeah, thank you for that talk. It was very interesting, apart from anything I didn't hear you refer to chemo.
So I was offered chemo. So they said that I could either have radio and chemo, or radio and the hormone treatment. And I was in there with my sister-in-law, and I was taking quite a bit of advice from her, and we decided not to have chemo at this stage and have that probably when my abiraterone stops working.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I was Gleason 9, and I started on chemo and then moved on to radiotherapy, and all the time taking Prostate as an injection. And the second point is really a PSA score. I went to my doctor and I had a PSA which was 3.5, 3 point something or another. And then I went because I needed a new hip. And when they saw the MRI, they said, you've got something more serious you need to sort out before we can give you your new hip. But the point was, I'd had a PSA test for 10 years, but I didn't have a digital rectal examination. And as soon as I went on the hormones, it dropped to 0.01. But the point I make is that 10 to 15% of people who have a prostate measurement, give false negatives. And that I'm one of the 10 to 15%.
And I get that, and I'm sorry about your situation. The counter argument, and some people say we shouldn't go down that route because of it, but I just think there's nothing else to pick up on it. And if they follow, and particularly now they've changed the pathway where they used to say people automatically have biopsy when they didn't need it, they can have an MRI scan now. That's so much better.
Well, I never forget the prostate, but I won't tell you. The biopsy, I won't tell you about that.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Practical question to help me in Herefordshire, please. As a business guy in my career, I've been a heavy user of LinkedIn, so this is a social media question. I'd like to do blogging, and I'd also like to get the attention of all the senior business people via LinkedIn who might live in Herefordshire and work. So I'd need a connection to your blog. If you could give me the name of it, how do I search for it? And then I'd like to blog alongside it and target men in the county of Herefordshire. We've got a population of 170,000, and there's 46,000 men who are over the age of 65. So it's a lovely channel for social media. It's far better than Facebook, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So could you give me a lift?
Absolutely. And what I've found quite useful for that is the female engagement with that has been huge. And one of the things that's worked for me is I work quite hard at whatever pictures I put on there with my blog as the headline thing, and that tends to grab people. But yeah, I'd be very, very happy to do that. Mary, did you?
Thank you.
Milo's just had his 2nd birthday. So one thing I didn't say that, which might be of interest, but it shows the different attitude of the medics. When I saw the urologist, I said, right, I've been fit and healthy all my life and had no major illnesses, and I've had 15 years of increasingly difficult caring, and I've had 3 years which has been diabolically difficult, and now I've got prostate cancer. So, any connection? And he just said, no, absolutely not, just bad luck. I said the same to my oncologist, and he said, we just don't know. He said, but what I will tell you is you've been severely sleep deprived probably for 15 years and excessively sleep deprived for 3 years, so your immune system's probably been rock bottom. But he said, I can't say one way or the other. So, Paul.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that inspiring talk. It's and you really should read the blog. It's brilliant. The point I was going to make was, I think, like me, you think, well, progress is going really well. There's lots of new stuff out there, and it kind of makes me think about the Transform program. So I can just see in 10 years' time they're going to say, yeah, we think PSA testing is probably a good idea. But actually, in 10 years' time, things will have moved so far ahead, that decision will be out of date.
What was really interesting for me was, so when I went to see the Newcastle people, so these glycans, they can also use those as part of a blood test. So it's an identification process as well. And they're so far advanced with that, they've actually taken out a patent on it. So when I sat next to Professor Moore, I said, right, with Transform, so these people in Newcastle so you've identified the things that you're going to start off with in Transform. They've got this new thing. She said, yeah, the point with Transform is we'll bolt those on. As those come in, they will be included. So there will be a whole load of new things coming on.
I was just a bit worried that they were going to freeze everything as it is now.
No. One of the frustrations I have when talking to people who aren't in this world is the papers are great at saying, oh, here's the cure for this, or whatever. And there's been a research breakthrough that's about 10 years away from being used. And then, like lutetium-177, which costs a gazillion pounds or whatever, it's miles away from practical use. And the media tend to jump on something as, oh, it's fixed.
Right. Anybody else? Any more questions at all? Dave.
Sorry.
It was just, obviously the presentation was absolutely wonderful and really inspiring. Is it going to be available? Is this been recorded so that we can pick it up from a website or something? Because obviously so much information to digest, and as you say, you can only take so much in.
But by all means, contact me if you want to.
Thank you.
That's right, but it will be on the website. A couple of days.
Can I just point to a few of the books that I think are really good, and if you want to come and take a picture of the covers. So this one you may have seen, Stories of Cancer and Hope, which is a collection of people's stories. So Tony's in there, as you'd expect, but there's some really great stories in that. I really like this. So this is a guy called Tim Baker, who's an Australian surfer who developed prostate cancer, and there's a phrase they use in surfing called patting the shark, where if a shark comes, you pat them. So if you're talking about patting the shark with the prostate cancer, but that's a really good read. This one is great, Prostate Cancer, a New Approach to Treatment and Healing. Very practical sort of workbook almost, with different sections, which is very good. And then for any of you on the dreaded hormone treatment, which of course is not hormones, this is a group, this is called Androgen Deprivation Therapy, an essential guide for prostate cancer patients and their loved ones, which is really informative, and they run a webinar every so often, which was really excellent. Say again? They're American. They're American, but they've got some UK people involved, I think, because it was University College London or somewhere like that was doing it.
Yeah. Just a couple of words. I've worked out as a district nurse for donkey's years, and a lot of our work was about encouraging men to go to a GP. We'd start off appointments on Saturdays or late in the evening. Nobody turned up, so they were stopped. I think you've got a fantastic opportunity to really encourage many other young men to get along to the doctors and think about their own health as well. Talk about the symptoms that you've had or got now. so that they're free to talk as well. Because my understanding is over the years, you haven't been able to do that. So I think that you're in a really good opportunity. This meeting has really made me feel better because you've achieved something that we could never do, which was get men together and to talk and discuss those difficult issues. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a really good.
I was just going to make the point that I was 70 when I was diagnosed with prostate, and that only came about because of a Wellman check. I wouldn't have known anything about it had it not been for that Wellman check at 70 years of age. There you go. So the earlier you can have those tests, the more chance you've got.
Absolutely, yeah.
Very quickly. Sorry, Gordon Kingston. You're a marvellous man. I thank you, really, for the personal bits that you've brought to this. One of the difficulties we all have, and I'm quite a long way just on the same sort of route as yourself, is that there are few other people to actually talk to about the advanced cancer levels. And the difficulty is that although people say you should go on to Zoom and so on, I don't really want to go in that direction for all sorts of personal reasons. But I don't know whether you've found any way of actually suggesting constructively how we actually allow and foment, in a way, encourage blokes to get together when they need to talk in greater depth than we've managed so far. Blokes used to come to us when we were up at Witchhaven and on occasion say, super talks that we've had here, Gordon, great, but you really need to deal with those more difficult subjects, you know, incontinence and erectile dysfunction, those sort of things, Ian. But we haven't gone very far in that direction, and we need to do. And the more I talk to guys at these meetings and the coffee and chats, there is a huge, I think, demand for something of that sort. So, ideas, suggestions, where do you start? Because you've been down quite a few avenues that have been really, truly inspirational. Thanks.
Well, thank you. It was a really good question. I think it's very difficult because there are people who just don't want to talk or talk in public or whatever, and there are other oversharers who are quite happy doing it. One thing I did wonder about is in the coffee and chats, and it'd be really interesting to hear what, I've only been to one so far, see what works, but whether there could be a period where 2 or 3 or 4 blokes just go off into a corner and share their own story and might be more comfortable just doing it in a small group, or whether there's a group that go off to talk about sexual problems or incontinence problems or whatever else. I'm just thinking back to work, and one of the things we did as a partner group was we used to, if we went away on a retreat, we'd just send 2 partners that didn't know each other to go and wander off in the garden somewhere and tell the other one something they didn't know about them, and just found it easier in that smaller group. So I just wonder whether there might be something around that. I don't know.
Thank you. I'm going to have to start. No. Okay. Ian, thank you so much. We've covered a lot of ground, and I think we're truly blessed in having people who can tell their story, and in a way that we all ought to be leaving here inspired to do more. We maybe feel our own contribution is minuscule compared with what somebody like Ian is doing. We can't all be like Ian, but we can maybe step up, a little bit more to helping each other out in different ways. It's been an emotional 24 hours for me. Yesterday, down in London, I had, at the Tackle Board meeting, I had Tony Collier on one side of me, Aidan Adkins on the other, both stage 4. Both people with so much to offer and doing so much for this movement, and you could only, marvel at the energy that they put in to prostate cancer support. And there on the screen, because he couldn't join us directly, was Dr. Steve Allen. So, these are some of the most wonderful people in the country, the best patient advocates. And we're so fortunate, I think, in this country that there are such people who will do the rounds, who will talk, who will inspire, who will go onto social media, who will make a difference. And I think that whole point that Ian was saying about making a difference, wherever you are, whether you're a shy retiring type and haven't done too much so far, I'm sure that everybody can find a way of doing something, even if it's engaging a bit more with some of the friends, some of the people that you know around and about. So it's been a privilege tonight. It was a privilege back in January talking to Ian for the very first time and enticing him into this group, into the county prostate cancer support group. What he's doing is quite remarkable, but I think now also within the group he's found one or two people that I hope will help him in different ways in his, hate to use the word journey, but journey ahead. So Ian, so many thanks for what you have done. I realise that my bottle of wine you're going to get is at the back of the room, and I'm not going to waste time. Go back there. I'll do that afterwards anyway. So my thanks anyway for everything that you've done this evening. And I hope we can go away here feeling, yeah, what a man. And let's go out and do a little bit more. Oh, thank you very much indeed. Right. Thank you. Anyway, there we go. You take it.
Thank you very much, everyone. And can I say thank you to Dan and to Peter. As you can tell, I don't mind standing up and talking, but I hate when the IT doesn't work. So thank you for fixing that.